Hi, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us a couple of minutes there. Thank you very much for joining us today. And welcome to our Theatre Green Book International Deep Dive webinar. I'm Laura Sedgwick, producer for the Theatre Green Book. And quite a few of you have probably come along to some of these before, but for anyone who hasn't, this is our fourth in our series of international deep dive webinars. So we're talking about planning capital projects for net zero today. Some of you might have joined our previous webinar on easy wins for building, so this will slightly build on that, but if you didn't come, don't worry, it'll still be very relevant and understandable. Just a very quick bit of housekeeping before we start. This session is being recorded. That's so we can share it with people who are on other time zones. And captioning is available today. If you want that, there should be a button at the bottom which says CC in it. And if you click on that, captions will come on. If you have any issues, just message me in the chat as we go and I will do my best to help. Please keep yourself muted while our speakers are talking, but if you have any questions that you think of, please do pop them in the chat as we go and we'll come to them at a suitable moment. To get started, I'd like to hand over to Lisa Berger, co-founder of Theatre Green Book and Renew Culture, who's going to be hosting today. Thank you.
Laura, thanks very much indeed, and welcome to everybody. Just in addition to Laura's opening introduction, I just wanted to recognise the financial support that we receive from Arts Council England for this international webinar initiative. Really grateful to them for their help in disseminating and sharing information about environmental sustainability internationally. I'm also hugely grateful to our panelists today. We're going to start with the four of them talking a little bit from their personal perspective about scoping capital projects. And they are, in order, Jacques Tilbury, who is founder of Plan. Plan was absolutely set up by Jacques to help theatre clients run building projects. Everyone involved in Plan has a theatre background, and so Jacques' knowledge of all of this area is huge for us and great, and I'm really grateful to him for joining us. Also Heather Walker. Heather is Chief Operating Officer at Royal Ballet and Opera, RB&O, in the middle of planning a major master plan initiative. Heather has experience from her time working at the Roundhouse and other large cultural organisations. Claire Appleby is Head of Theatre Buildings at the Theatres Trust and its Architecture Advisor. Claire will talk a little bit more about what the Theatres Trust does and means in the UK. But Claire is also Chair of the Theatre Green Book Buildings Committee, which is responsible for sharing, developing and disseminating Theatre Green Book information about buildings. And then finally, absolutely delighted to be joined by Nina Jacques. Nina's dramaturg at National Theatre Prague and also their sustainability champion, and just exemplifying that people in all parts of organisations are involved in the Theatre Green Book and can really help their organisations make significant progress. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Heather to kick us off. Heather.
Hi, everybody. Really nice to join you. So I was going to talk a little bit about the project that we are, in a sense, still developing, but we are starting to do some projects in our master plan, even whilst we are planning the latter stages of the main programme. And I suppose starting with that, really, which is to say, I'm sure, like many theatres, many cultural organisations with big estates to manage, we have probably not at RB&O spent enough money over the years maintaining what we have, coupled with things have changed, coupled with what was put in maybe 25 years ago that was state of the art is not just suffering now from its age, but is also, you can no longer maintain it. It's become obsolete. You can't get spare parts. And if that sounds familiar, it's good to be in your company, because I think traditionally cultural organizations don't focus their money on equipment and their buildings. So we find ourselves in that situation with a need to think about 10 years ahead at what we want the organization to look like, what the building needs to respond to, and the kind of organization we will be in 10 years' time, whilst recognizing that we've got some urgent projects that if we don't get on with now, we risk our operation. So we're in this situation of sort of planning 10 years ahead, but already fixing the things that are urgent. And I suppose the role I have, and just sort of thinking about what I wanted to share with you today, is how do you represent your organization to a set of consultants and specialists who are going to help you think about how to plan that capital program from all sorts of angles. So from a sort of mechanical engineering, plumbing perspective, from a sustainability perspective, the people who are going to help you with planning, the people who are going to help you think about reconfiguring your building so it now responds to the needs of the organization, whilst also being the person who's listening to your stakeholders and your users of the building, your customers, if you like. And I suppose I often think of myself as having to be a mirror that is a mirror in both directions. So I need to listen and absorb all of those comments that our staff, our artists, our customers are saying about what's not working in the building, what ratio of space between those different groups is no longer coherent. But also then listening to architects and contractors and specialists in building projects about what the opportunities are. And I think, a lot of people will say, well, you need to start with a scope and a spec. But in my experience, actually that thing develops. That you start with a problem, and you need to be able to describe the problem and maybe the opportunity you're trying to grasp. And then you need to listen to what your stakeholders are telling you about what they need and want. And then you listen to all those specialists that you've hired, and they tell you what's possible. And that often gives you a completely different set of ideas. You go back to your stakeholders and say, well, actually, as we fix some of these issues, there's an opportunity, be it to use the space differently or to accelerate some of your sustainability targets, or to think entirely differently about collaborating with other organizations, other partners in how you might deliver something. So for me, the sort of the scale of what we're doing is having to be very open, very absolutely in listening mode on both sides of those conversations, in order to try and land what this project is in the right place that is ambitious but is also realistic in time and money terms for delivery, and is going to not just satisfy what your stakeholders say they need, but maybe even challenge them, inspire them to think differently about the project you're trying to deliver. And then all of that for me is now, as we continue to plan that sort of long lead master plan, is making sure we're getting on with the things that are urgent, that in the pursuit of the finished article of what that master plan looks like, we don't lose sight of actually something is urgent, and we're going to have to be pragmatic about the things we do now and how they will fit into our future ideas. How's that for a starter?
Heather, that's great. Thank you very much. Sorry, I lost my mute button. And Jack, I wonder, could you pick it up then from the contractor's side for us? We've got as a client, as Heather has said, we're talking to you. How do you see these capital projects developing?
I think picking up just slightly earlier in the story, from Heather's perspective, one bit of advice I would give, particularly with a sort of very challenging funding environment at the moment, is if you're employing a design team to come and help solve a problem, often that problem is sometimes quite small. I'll use a case study at the moment. We're working with Stephen Joseph Theatre in Scarborough. They initially employed us to employ a team to look at a refurb of their small cinema studio space. And we started work on that. And then they said, oh, well, the roof leaks, which wasn't part of the scope. And they said, oh, well, the air handling doesn't really work either. It's never worked. So that became part of the scope. And then it sounded, and then suddenly some money came in potentially from a local authority, from a sustainability fund, to say, well, if we could pay you to insulate the roof. And this sort of thing grew legs and grew legs. And so what we did was stop with the design team. Okay, well, this is obviously a much wider project. This could be a £10 million project, whereas we only really started with 1 million. We know you've only got $500,000, but it's going to be much better to use this team you've got now to design the whole project, the whole scope, and essentially develop a master plan, so that as time and money and opportunity arises, it could be over the next 10 years or next 15 years, you've got a plan designed by the team that you can then pick off. And there are quite a number of projects we're working on at the moment where we've developed a master plan a few years ago, and money will come in from surprisingly different angles to say, oh, we can refurbish those dressing rooms now. And instead of doing that as a real ad hoc bit of work, we've got a design for that. We've done the design work. So I just encourage you to think about master planning your building, because as a whole, because while you might think, well, it's going to be, I say, it could be 10 million, you've only got 1. It could be 40 million, you've only got 4. It could be 1 million, you've only got 100,000. But almost every project will grow legs and will start to influence other bits of the building, and particularly with sustainability. You find, well, we can't do that. We need to insulate the roofs. We can't insulate the roofs without changing the plant. We can't just change the plant light for light because we want to change to air source heat pumps. And these things grow legs very, very quickly. So I would advise you initially to start with the bigger scheme, a bigger understanding of your own project, have the whole thing designed by the team, and then pick some of those bits off bit by bit. So the Stephen Joseph Theatre at the moment, I can share my screen very, very quickly as an example. They have 6 roofs. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 roofs, and we designed each roof independently, and we went out to tender to a contractor, and we had each roof priced independently, and we had each set of plant replacements priced independently. So there's one set of plant here, there's a set of plant here, there's a set of plant here. We've started on site on this roof because this is what we got the funding from. We're currently working with funders on replacing this roof, and that could follow on straight along, and then we can replace this plant. So as money and funders and opportunity comes along, we can pick each of those projects off one by one. And we might end up finishing all this in the next year. It could be the next 10 years, but at least that work has been done throughout the site.
And Jack, I guess the huge advantage of this, because this might sound a bit panicky for some of the people on the call. You start off with an idea, and before you know it, you've got a £10 million project and £500,000 fundraising. The huge advantage is that we're talking about planning here. We're not talking about doing, are we? And as Heather was saying, we're talking about potentially a 10-year time scale. This is why we really encourage everybody, even at the beginning of using the Theatre Green Book for buildings, to do a plan for the whole of your building, to think about environmental sustainability, so that you can raise the funds, so that you can think about how you're going to do this in a methodical way, as and when you get the funds. And Jacques, I think you're saying that it is possible then over time to pick off the projects in a systematic way.
Yeah, and I mean, often getting that initial money to pay for a design team is often the hardest money to come across. I'm not downplaying that, but if you've got them for a small project, it's significantly more efficient and cheaper in the long run to get that team to look at the wider project while they're there. And even if that's only an initial study for 3 months to come up with a master plan, it's not a full design, every nut and bolt through for the whole £10 million project, but it's that overall master plan of the building. And we found again and again and again, I know it's a real cliche of the sort of the shovel ready, but money will suddenly come up and a funder will say, we will fund this if you're ready to start in 6 months' time. And if you've got that master plan, you've got the outline design already, you can put it on the table to the fund and go, well, we've got this, we can start in a year's time, we can start in 6 months' time. And it also means that even if it's just the general ongoing maintenance work you're doing within your existing building can be done alongside the master plan. So you're not doing abortive work, so you're not doing stuff that's going to later have to be taken out. It sounds really, really obvious, but there's no point redoing a roof if in 6 months, it's in 2 years' time, you need to put a new plant on it because you're going to completely trash through it. There's no point in putting a new plant on the roof if in 3 years' time you're going to have to put a new roof on it because you'd have to take the plant off. And you might not know that you need to put the plant there because currently the plant's over here. But with air source heat pumps, they won't sit there. So you're going to need to put the plant on this roof. But you won't know that unless you've done that overall building-wide study, that there's no point replacing that roof right now because in 3 years' time, you're going to have to put a plant on it. So I think, obviously, it's worth obviously getting a very, very good team, getting an architect, particularly a very good services engineer who are used to working on sustainability projects. Make sure it's in their scope to do your carbon calculations and to work within the Green Book and sustainability development. But my one big advice for this is look at the wider project initially, even if I say it's only a 3 or 4 month initial study, to get that master plan going, to start to spot those problems, and then pick off the problems one by one over a series of years.
Thanks, Jacques. Claire, you were nodding there. Do you want to talk a little bit from the sort of planning perspective?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Jacques has said. I think being able to have a view of the wider project and then be able to kind of cut that down into bite-sized chunks and bring parts forward as and when funding comes forward is really, really important. But if you look at it from the planning perspective as well, it's great to be able to put in that whole scheme kind of for planning purposes as well, and make sure you're ready to go, because you don't want to have your project held up because you haven't got your planning in place, or you haven't got your, in the UK, your listed building consents in place. So at Theatres Trust, a lot of our work is involving supporting theatre organisations who are already working with existing buildings. Many of those are heritage buildings, and supporting them through that kind of journey, supporting them on their way to realising that capital works project. And particularly in planning. And I think what we really understand is that tackling sustainability upgrades in existing heritage buildings can seem a really daunting task. Some can feel really, really challenging. And trying to achieve that balance between sustainable improvements and maintaining kind of architectural and historic significance of the building is not always a straightforward process. But it's really vitally important to address. We all know that we have to address these issues head on, and just even carrying out one small improvement can make a massive, massive difference. So I think what we would say to people is that at the very beginning of the journey, and it's kind of going back to what Jacques was saying about understanding your whole project, start from the beginning, understand your building. You really want to understand the history of your building. You want to understand its architectural importance, those areas of particular historic significance. It won't just help in understanding where change can be made and in justifying where that change can be made. So where you can run new services through, where you might be able to put solar panels and all of that. But you can also learn huge amounts about the building you have through a better understanding of it. So Victorian and Edwardian buildings had to use natural ventilation methods. There are kind of natural routes for ducts and shafts kind of built into that building. Can we use those in some way? Understanding the construction and the fabric of the building, and again, particularly for heritage buildings, they were constructed to breathe. They're not the airtight construction we see today, so they need to have a different approach and different methodology towards them. We need to understand the condition of your building, about building services, look at current energy performance as well, see whether your energy, where your building's losing heat. And going back to what Heather said as well, looking at your organisation's and your users' needs and demands for that building as well. So it's really a consideration of kind of the constraints and where the opportunities lie. And all of those will help you get those building blocks in place for your project and feed into your proposals. It might feel really daunting to do at first, but there is really good advice out there. Theatre Green Book obviously is absolutely brilliant. And Lisa, as you've mentioned, there's the home survey, the building survey tool, which is a really, really good way to start to build up your sustainability plan as well. Once you have your project, it's really important to go and talk to planners, to your planning departments, your planning authorities at those really, really early stages. Get them on side, bring them on board, understand where those challenges are. At Theatres Trust, we advise and support theatre buildings across the UK, and we can help support theatres on their journey as well. To go and speak to the planners, we understand theatre buildings. We are a team of advisors who have expertise across theatre, across architecture, across planning, across theatre operations. So we can look at a building really holistically as well, really understand the operation, and maybe help planners also understand a little bit about the needs of those theatre buildings. So I think, Lisa, from our point of view, particularly with planning, it's about going back to those first principles. Understand your building, really understand what you have in the first place, which will then allow you to build up that project.
And Claire, I know from my travels, a lot of people sort of feel very apprehensive, fearful about talking to the planning authority. Can you give any guidance, or feeling that they're just going to get the answer no to some of the ideas that Jacques was putting forward about things on roofs? Can you talk to us a little bit about how to approach that and what the general environment is for planning changes for environmental sustainability improvements?
I think in the UK we are seeing change as well, and we're seeing the planning system realising that change needs to be made. As I say, in terms of speaking to the planners, early engagement is always good. So to go and to speak to them about the ideas of your project early doors is always a good idea. They want to be part of the conversation with you. And it can help explain your project. Just kind of giving them a done deal and just saying this is what we want to do is much more difficult. So I think having those conversations is really useful. And as I say, I think if you can present your evidence for why it needs to be done and that justification for change as well, and looking at areas where you can put that plant. Jacques has talked about the roofs at the Stephen Joseph Theatre. I mean, are there areas of that building which are less overlooked, which are areas that are going to have less impact on the surrounding areas? You know, where are your residential units around you? Where are those kind of areas of major impact as well? So it's understanding your building, it's understanding its setting and its situation, and just making sure that you've taken those considerations, those constraints, but also those opportunities into consideration.
Thanks, Claire. Jacques?
I just completely agree with everything Claire said. I just add to that typically, you know, as a client, I would advise that conversation to happen through the architect generally. I mean, it's not that if you feel confident enough as a client, or you might already have a good relationship with your local planning officer, often theatres do. I typically hold back a little bit until I've at least done some concept designs, concept drawings, concept understanding of what we're looking at doing, and potentially just also understanding with your architect if it's likely to be controversial. Because sometimes you look at a project and you look at the surrounding area and an architect can say, well, there's a massive high rise next to you and there's a big building over there and that's ugly and you're going to be fine. Or an architect might look at it with you and go, this is going to be really difficult. That line is obviously sacrosanct and you're in a conservation area. And we might have to take this quite gently and quite slowly. Actually, we might want to get a lot of ducks in a row, a lot of drawings and sketches and justification before we go and have that early conversation. So definitely as early as you can, as Claire said, but sometimes you just want to feel out where you're going to be sitting, what justification you might need, what evidence you might be, and generally, I would probably recommend doing that with some help, with an expert, with either. I mean, sometimes you actually employ a planning consultant completely separately if it's really controversial, where you're really going to have to start looking at precedents and looking at planning laws and looking at talking to various councillors, particularly about it's in their ward and they always object to this sort of thing, and we have to, lobbying. Hopefully, no one has to deal with that, but and generally, a quiet word with the architect by your side is usually all it needs. But and often it's an ongoing dialogue through over a number of months as designs develop and keeping them informed.
And this is an international series. So, and one of the things that I'm thinking about is that I think we've seen in the UK that with people collaborating and advocating to authorities, you can make change. I'm aware of the changes of solar panels in relation to churches, for example, heritage bodies feeling that this is something that's important and isn't as adverse. So just think about that. Coming together, you're not always alone, and sometimes a joint initiative can help. Heather, come in.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to move to Nina.
Well, just a couple of thoughts. I mean, firstly, our local authority is Westminster City Council, and we have started conversations with them about some of the planning challenges we may have. But they also have funds for building work. So actually, we're in receipt of some of their funding for a sustainability project. So I think when you realise, quite often when you're talking to the planning people in a council, you're talking to a very separate bunch of people from the ones that have got funds. But if you can sort of join up some of those conversations, I think that can really help. The other thing I was going to mention is I couldn't agree more about, if you can have a plan for your entire building, even if you're not ready to tackle it all in one go. Of course, that
I didn't mean it.
But I think one of the things we were conscious of is that we had some things that were urgent and couldn't wait even until we've got a full master plan. And one of our sort of, I suppose, principles in this was, are we doing anything that is going to mess up a bigger plan? And largely what we decided to do was focus on the things that won't move. So we've got on with all of our lift refurbishments. We know our lift shafts are not going to move somewhere else in the building. We will be getting on with the external works. And then we've largely concentrated our first few big projects on stage infrastructure. And partly because that's where the biggest risk of not operating will be if that breaks, but also because it's a pretty contained area where we're whatever we're doing over in another part of the building in the master plan, the stage isn't moving. So, it is. It's. I'd love to be sitting here right now saying, we've completed the plan for the next 10 X plus years, but urgency is also something that you've got to pay attention to.
Well, I think that's a really good moment to cue Nina, because over in Prague they had that plan 10 years and have delivered it. So Nina, tell us how we should all be going about it.
You're on mute, Nina.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, that's great.
Yes, thank you so much. And sorry for that. I'm just trying to see where is the full screen of my PowerPoint button, but here I have it. Yeah. First of all, I would like to excuse myself for maybe a little bit difficult sound situation, as I had to go somewhere else because I had problems, with internet in my quiet place. I would propose something more like a case study, I feel, because these thoughts were more general and how to approach it from this perspective. And this will be a very specific case study of ours. I'm from the National Theatre in Prague, as was mentioned. And because I thought you are not all familiar with our theatre, I will do just a quick introduction. We are a very complicated structure and institutions spread all over the city. So we have 4 venues and 2 workshops and 1 warehouse and 1 building with offices and rehearsal rooms. And all of them, not together, even though we will have one of these historical buildings that you see on the picture and our modern, so-called modern building, because it was built also 40 years ago. And now we already experienced it. It's really getting old already. And they will be next to each other, so they will create like a microclimate, these 2 very different architectures together. But otherwise, it's spread it all over the city. So the hardest part is like really to create this master plan as a whole. So it will be more about master plans for the different buildings and facilities itself. But this is a little bit what we are dealing with and we're dealing with. Because our story that I would like to share with you started already 20 years ago with, in 25 with our head of technical administration, Mr. Růžička, who was really the key leading figures in a period where sustainability and all these topics linked to environment, especially in the Czech Republic, were not in the mind of people. It was really something controversial. We even had a president of the country, Václav Klaus, who was denying climate changes. So it was really more about saving energies and energy consumption topics. So it all started with this one person who really wanted to make changes and bring efficiency to the buildings and to the whole environment and to the whole system. And as I will share a story 20 years ago, then later I will try to go a little bit what we are now, the situation we are now, because it feels like we are going through a second round after 20 years now, because facilities and all the different technical methods are going forward. So this is also interesting, this time perspective. There are examples of technologies and things that were installed, but I mean it will be very individual then. But the heat pumps and the stage technology, hydraulic engines were key things, because usually with the sustainability and energy consumption facilities and sorry, I don't have the word now, but energy consumption things that were done in the National Theatre in Prague, people usually have this image in mind of the solar panels, photovoltaic cells that were installed off the roof of the modern building of the new stage of the National Theatre. But then we will see that it's only 2% of the energy consumption of only this building. But it's something very visual, but it was more, different small things and also major things that were done that really made the change then. And what happened in 2010, so it was like 5 years after Mr. Růžička started his master plan and his whole strategy of really going down with the energy consumption of the National Theatre in Prague, was that we had really major savings in money that happened. And the energy consumption of gas were around 50%. So it was really huge and a huge amount of money that was saved. So it was something that also changed the perspective for different theatres also in Prague, that we could see really different in the money approach. Was also this is something that many sustainable managers are saying in the Czech Republic. When people see financial differences, then it will motivate them really, not really the sustainable aspect or ecological aspect of it. So yeah, here you see a major increase of gas consumption. And now I wanted to go a little bit through the money, because it's something that I often speak about when I present this story, is that we used in 2005 this method of energy performance contracting, because it was a time where a major energy company offered this to us. And this is about the money that you can gather at the beginning to start a project. That the energy performance contracting is actually a contract that you make with the provider of the facilities. It works like a loan, and you're paying back the provider with the savings that you are made. So, for example, they will calculate guaranteed savings, and this is the money that will go to them back. And because it works like a loan, then they do calculations for example, 10 years, and they will say, you will pay us back in 10 years' time. And for example, here you see that the guaranteed savings for 2010 were 186 thousand euros, but actually the achieved savings were around 75 or almost 80,000 euros bigger. So this is money that then will be split in half, and half of the money will go to the company, and half of the money will go back to the national tier. So this was really roughly, because we don't have the time, the financing method that was behind it. I would be happy to share more with you if someone is interested. But what is interesting, and I want to quickly share with you now, we have new figures for 2024 about the consumption, energy consumptions in the national theatre after 20 years. And we still will have major gas consumption in our theatre. And also to understand, this is also an energetical security question in our country, because we were for a long period of time, many decades, dependent on Russian gas, Russian gas. And this is something that is changing now, but still, this is a major topic, how to replace the gas consumption, and will be the largest contributor to our emission until today. So in the second round, I'm telling you about, this is a major topic that we are facing now. This you don't have to go through. And just, I was thinking to give you an idea after this new calculation we made this year. We from the figures I presented to here, the spread of the emissions on employee, on the surface, and on our audience members. To give you an idea. And just the message would be, because Mr. Růžička retired 5 years ago. So what do we do when the leader leaves for retirement? And then this is really something we had to deal. The knowledge must be shared and not held in the head of one person, even though at the beginning it was really something very important. And really have an understanding and shared values between the people within the institution. And remember that sustainability is an ongoing process, so you are never done, even though we were speaking a lot about the master plan in this session. But still, this ongoing process is something very important, because buildings are getting old and technologies are getting more efficient and better in general. So it will really have this many rounds perspective that So thank you. It will be all for me. Very, very rough, brief perspective. I hope it's okay for you.
Nina, that was just brilliant. Thank you. And really good to include a project within this, which was all about environmental sustainability, or is what it became. And also this idea that environmental sustainability initiatives can save you money, which is another part of the whole process, I think, of thinking and planning your projects. It's another way of thinking about a motivation for doing it, which will help to convince stakeholders and might be another way of finding money. We haven't talked about cost in any of this, which it seems to me that the budget for your capital project, the contingency for your capital project, and just generally thinking about contingencies is quite important. Claire, is that something you want to talk about from your experience? I saw you gone off mute.
No, sorry, I was just going to come in before and just exactly as you were saying, Lisa, that idea that these sustainable measures can actually save you money is really, really important. And that idea of continual monitoring and evaluation of your project, reporting and sharing your progress is really important. It's important internally, externally. Funders love that, and they love to know the impact of the project that they've funded as well. So it is really vital to do. And we had some brilliant examples from some of our small grants projects that we funded. So the Marlowe Theatre in Canterbury, when they, sorry, I've got a emergency vehicle going past outside. I hope that's not coming through. We helped the Marlowe Theatre in Canterbury add some solar panels to its roof, and within 2 years of that installation being completed, they had seen a net return on their initial investment. And they were saying between May and June of last year, those panels generated the equivalent of 20 performances on their stage. And they had this fantastic statistic which they related to the numbers of cups of tea that would be, and it was something like 1 million cups of tea. I'm sorry, I can't find the figure. But it just made it really relatable to everybody. And that's something you could take to anybody in your organisation and just say, this is what our work has done. So, I think that idea of being able to understand what the payback can be is really, really vital and important.
Thank you. Now, I think we should also be turning this over to questions from the audience. So if you've got questions, please can you pop them into the chat? We had a couple come in advance of the webinar, so I'll kick off with some of those. And one of the questions was, how can you plan and prioritise projects in advance of getting funding? Anyone? Jack, you're the one who's, go on, go for it.
Yeah, I think, as I said, the hardest money to come across is often, as it's often called, sort of development money, the design team money. It's sort of the bootstrap catch-22, where funders might say, well, you can't even talk to us until you've got planning permission. But it could cost you 5% of your overall budget just to get to planning permission. It could be, depending on the scale of the project, you could be 50 grand or it could be £500,000 to get to planning. So where does that money come from? And that's not really I'm not sure whether the question means if you've got a design team or if you don't have a design team, have you got the funding to hire an architect or not? If assuming you haven't got any money for any experts at all, then I think it's picking up on what Claire said, which is just start to try and understand your building as best as possible. Try and dig out all the drawings, all the surveys, talk to all the current and past maintenance managers. Try and get some drawings done. Try and get some surveys done. And whatever money you can scrape together, the first money should be on surveys and investigations. And then if there's a few more £1,000, hire an architect just to do an initial outline scheme of some sort, or a service engineer if it's primarily sort of MEP plant. I think if you can scrape together some money to hire a small team initially, you can hire a team just to do like a 6-week to 12-week study, which will do a huge amount gives you a huge amount of benefit in understanding the building, understanding the scope of the project, very outline costs, but also some sketches and some ideas, which are brilliant for going to the funder, going to the council, going to a high net worth individual, because you've got something on paper. You say, well, we've had some sketches done. Here's some lovely visualizations, and just starts that process going. I've said to a lot of clients, and it has come true when I've said, recently we did a study that cost £1 million. We convinced a client. We convinced the client to spend £300,000 on getting a team together and doing an initial study. And I said, if we've got this study done, funding will come off the back of it. Or if funding comes up, we can get off the back of it. And off the back of that £300,000, we leveraged £1 million funding. It just came up through, I won't mention the project or the funding body, it came up through a public funding body, which was, we've got this money, we have to spend it on this type of thing. Have you got a project? Yes, we've done the study. Here it is. It's on your desk now, 3-month evaluation, and we've got £1 million. Because we'd done that early work, because we had it on paper, we had the plans, we had the drawings, we had the ideas, we had the vision, we had a cost plan. And it does often work that way around, bizarrely. You have to put the sort of cart before the horse and try and get that thinking done, and money bizarrely does just sometimes appear and like, well, we have to spend it by next March. I mean, so many times you've probably heard that, everyone around this table, we've got this money, but you have to spend it by next March. Great, well, we've got this project, we can get going next week, we'll spend it by next March. But if you haven't done that initial design, you haven't got the work done, you're never going to be at that table in the discussion. So I think whenever money, I say whether it's £5,000 or £50,000 or £500,000, there is something you could do with that money to start advancing your project. And whether it's just initial surveys, an architect will come and do an initial review for £5,000. Very high level, very outline, but you'll get some sketches and some ideas, and you can build off that project, or say get a services engineering for £3,000. So give us an idea, give us a rough outline of how bad is our plant, what would you suggest, how could we improve it, and just start the process going with some experts.
I think that's a really interesting thing you touch on there, Jacques, that you can get consultants to come on this journey with you if you've got a leadership and a commitment and a drive, particularly if your organisation is doing well. People want to be associated with success, don't they? Claire, you must see this a lot from your side in the Theatres Trust, and particularly some of the smaller projects, how people get going.
Yes, and I agree with everything Jack says. I think trying to find that early funding stream for kind of the development work can be challenging. In the UK, there are kind of pots out there, particularly for heritage buildings, actually, that's helpful. There are organisations out there which kind of particularly focus on that. And some of the funding that we give can focus on things like that as well for specific theatre types. But what I would say, I'm going to go back to the building survey tool as well with regards kind of prioritisation, Lisa, because I think that does give a really, really good initial, very high level view start for kind of theatre projects. So when it's a very simple tool to fill out. I'm sure people have been on webinars about it already, and I'm sure are very knowledgeable about it. But it's a really useful tool to really understand where you can do some easy wins on your project that you can carry out yourself, which are quick, easy, cheap to do, those which can kind of be combined in with your maintenance projects, and those which kind of really need that longer term project as well. So the project can be broken that way. But exactly as Jack says, having a holistic view of that project, if you've got the money in to get your architects on board and give you kind of that quick look at a kind of an overview of your building and what can be done, it's really important to look at how you can break that down into phases without doing something and then having to undo it later because you've suddenly got to put plant onto a roof which you've just fitted out or something like that. So I think it's the kind of the prioritization is really useful. The building survey tool can give an idea of it as soon as you're able to get a design team on board and to give you that kind of more detailed look at it. Brilliant, because that can really help you then phase the project and break it down.
Thanks, Claire. And then another question we've got is what's the advice on setting realistic timescales for reaching net zero in a 125-year-old theatre? Now, Heather, you know I'm going to come to you for this, because at the Royal Ballet and Opera, you've done this extraordinary piece of work as a team, doing exactly that. We've got just 2 or 3 minutes really to talk about this, but a way in to thinking about it.
So we pretty quickly decided what our targets should be for net zero on scopes 1 and 2. And in a sense, that is the the easier part of this setting targets, because you've got more control over it. And you know, we as I say, we have this big building project to do, and we had included, in any case, a complete renewal of our energy arrangements as part of that. So that was something we set with board approval relatively quickly. The more difficult bit is scope 3, which you haven't got control over. It is your supply chain. It is it is a wide range of things which people all over the organization have got some input in, whether you choose that material or whether you recycle or reuse, or and we'd started down a route of saying, well, let's trial some targets for this, and it became really difficult to know how we were going to measure them, because they're not always are things to measure. And so we actually did a piece of work using the Theatre Green Book status, so basic, intermediate and advanced, to say, well, what would we have, we sort of turned the question the other way around. What would we have to be doing to be able to say this is now at intermediate, or this is now at advanced? And we set that all out for ourselves and said, well, it would mean we were doing this, and it would mean we were doing that on each of the sort of lines in the Green Book. And we sort of looked at it and said, well, we can get to intermediate pretty easily, so why wouldn't we push ourselves to go to advanced? And so now what we have is a set of targets for how we will get to advanced, and what that means across the organization. Different teams have got to deliver and have signed up to, and pretty much everybody is. So happy to share some of how we've done that, if that's helpful.
And then specifically in relation to buildings and environmental sustainability, that's all part of your master planning, isn't it?
Yeah, so hitting carbon, decarbonizing our building is absolutely part of the master plan. And
there's a timescale, which of course is, and a series of actions, which of course will be dependent upon funding. But back to where we started, at least you have a plan and have a way of engaging with consultants to say, these are our priorities here.
Yeah, and as a long-term plan, the exact how we're going to get there may shift a bit, and I think that's fine. I think we've got a sort of a moment in time that we've got to make a decision one way or the other in order to hit our target. But in the meantime, we will just stay open to some options, because there are new ideas emerging, there is new technology emerging, and there are partnerships that if we can tap into, we want to.
So just to finish, I was wanting to ask each of you, what does it look like to be a good client, and to make your contribution to capital project planning as effective as possible? Jacques, will you from your consultant side, what do the good clients look like?
I think, they look like all sorts of different, very different bodies, very different sizes, different sort of governance structures. But I think the first step is to recognize that you are a client, and you are in control of the project, or you will need to be in control of the project. It is your responsibility. And often you can be very quickly get overwhelmed and go, oh, well, I'll give it to architects and project managers, and there's a team, and it's all their job, and they'll get on with it. But ultimately, it's your project. And if something goes wrong, it's probably your fault. Because you've probably not taken the advice you needed, or you've not given it enough time, or you've not employed the right people. So take a step back with your governance structure, with your management team, with your board, and go, hey, this is a big thing, and we're going to be a client, and we need to be a professional client, and we need to set a standard, and we need to lead this project. So are we ready to do that? Are we able to do that? Is that something we can do? And we might be talking to the chair of the board and going, is that something you're comfortable with? If the answer is no, then you need to get someone who is. You need to get a chair of the project committee who's an experienced construction person to chair that board, to lead that project, because you are going to have to make some very, very difficult decisions, and you need to know what you're talking about. So you need to get some expertise on your board to run that project. After that, hire some really good people.
Thanks, Jack. Claire.
Yeah, I was following on from what Jack said. I think for us, it's making sure that organisations really fully embed sustainability within their processes. And so when they're looking at a capital works project, they've got buy-in across the board from everyone within their organisation. I was talking to somebody yesterday and we were talking about some wonderful capital works project they had. And then as we were talking, we suddenly came across the idea that actually the buildings team and the ops team weren't really talking to each other, and the ops team hadn't really taken on board what was going on. And actually, until there was some behavioural and educational changes, all the wonderful work that was going to happen wasn't going to make any sense. But I think it's not just embedding it across the organisation. I think it's then taking that through and putting it right at the heart of your capital works project. We had a wonderful case study from the Mercury Theatre in Colchester at our conference a few years back. And when they looked at their project, they really made sure that sustainability was front and centre of that project, and that everybody knew it was a top priority for them. It was even written into the tender documentation, and the results were brilliant. So I think it's just really making sure that everybody's on board with sustainability as a top priority.
Thank you very much. Nina, have you got anything to add from Prague? With closing seconds.
Yes, maybe it's something, like a dialectical approach a little bit, to have, and really I think it was also our story is about this, like to have ambition and be ready to get the perspective and a solution that you were not imagining before as a client, because you're going to experts and they will come with this perspective. So and because also our solution with the energy performance contracting and also the different solutions that will go to us, to have this open mind, but at the same time having good data and having conscious of yourself, like what your institution is and what you need, and have constant collection of data is something that was interesting and important for us. And now, with because I didn't speak about this, but now the installation of management software is really a big topic to really go in the second round. I try to give the perspective a little bit. So yeah, to have this data collection, to have the conversation with experts. Yeah, that would be for me.
Thanks, Nina. And then Heather, it's 4 o'clock.
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more with Jack. I mean, it definitely hire some good people, have champions on your board, have a vision and ambition, and work out how to be sort of, I don't know, sort of hold the torch for that vision, but be flexible in the process of how you get there and what order you do things in. But yeah, definitely good people around you.
Thanks, everybody, ever so much. And I love those closing words, the idea of ambition and being bold and expertise. And I feel all our panelists have got absolutely bags of that. So thank you all very much indeed. And Laura has posted some links into the chat. Do get back in touch with us if there's anything else that you'd like to know, or you've got any thoughts about future webinars. Otherwise, good luck with those capital projects. Bye, everybody.